Loaded pod for you. A lot of sports. Talking hoops. Milwaukee's win. What does it mean? Does it mean anything for OKC? UVM national champs. Don't get to say it a lot. Rob Dow, the head coach of the men's soccer team that won a national championship this week. We're going to talk a little soccer with him and his journey. Danny Kanell, college football. It's been a while. He was almost banned from the show. We're going to hash it all out, and we'll go through the brackets, and we've got life advice. The Milwaukee Bucks win the NBA Cup last night. Dominant fashion over OKC, 97-81. A very impressive win. Also a reminder, although I don't know that we need Giannis reminders, but just a nice display of his physical dominance. And just, I loved what I saw from him last night, and that happens a lot when I watch him. 26, 19, and 10, the 3 blocks. So now what? What do we do with this game that happens in December that means something? I like the in-season tournament, now the NBA Cup. I think it's great. There are plenty of games in this stretch where I'm like, I think these guys are playing really hard because of this. So that's a win. We get into scheduling. I don't think it's really that disruptive. And I don't want to talk scheduling. I'm sick of talking about scheduling. I'm sick of hearing from people trying to fix everything every fucking day. So let's just talk about basketball. So what does it mean? Big picture, I mean, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, hey, didn't the Lakers win this thing last year? Weren't we forced into a morning after of analysis of like, do we have to call the Lakers title contenders? And then what happened, Russillo? Then what happened? Yeah, you're right. I got it. So I'm not going to do that. I just think we should talk about the Milwaukee Bucks and their turnaround in the season. So let's do that. Milwaukee started 1-6. They're now 14-11. And remember, last night's game doesn't count as a win or a loss, and the stats don't count. So some of this can be a little off. And I was digging through some of the stats this morning. But so they're the 5 seed in the East. I think they're a 3 seed ceiling. Nobody right now in the East is, I think, even close to the level of Cleveland and Boston. So if you include the Cup final victory, which again is not technically the right thing to do, Milwaukee from that 1-6 point to the 14-11 overall, but they're actually 11-2 during this stretch of wins. Defensively, they're 19th overall. So we knew at the beginning of the year, you're like, this team's just going to suck on defense all the time. But since the 1-6 start, so I plugged it in at November 5th to now, Milwaukee's 9th in defense. You could get into some net rating stuff that maybe would put them behind even more teams that maybe you won't really like. Not going to do that right now, but they just felt written off. And part of that was a carryover to the lack of playoff success. The loss to Miami 2 years ago was the 1 seed, the loss to the Pacers last year, but there's also something very constant in that. They were a mash unit there in the Pacers series. No Giannis, who gets hurt at the end of the regular season. And then in the Heat series, although I'd allow either to happen, that even with healthy Giannis, there was something weird and off about that team, because even when Giannis came back, but he played, I believe, it's 3 of the 5 games, and I think it's half of the available minutes in that entire series that he was playing. I'd like to think if he was healthy the entire time, they still figure out a way to win. You may differ. That's fine. I'm not going to scream about it. But the reason why the 1-6 start this year, whether it's Adrian Griffin into Doc, into what's up with the defense, the Dame trade isn't really working, as Giannis, like all of these chaotic things are happening 2 weeks into the season, and now they've steadied the ship. And I think last night was the culmination of what we've kind of seen here for the last few weeks from them. The real thing, it's not some dramatically improved defense, because I don't know if that's going to happen with Dame and Brook Lopez and some of the other pieces that they have, but it's been the shooting. They're the 3rd best 3-point shooting team in the league. Like, look at these numbers. Dame's at 37. Portis is at 37. Gary Trent's at 39%. AJ Green, 48%. Prince is at 52%. And the best thing about the 3-point shooting is Giannis has stopped taking them. He's at 0.7 attempts per game. 5 years ago, he was taking 5 threes a game. Then it was kind of 4, then it was 4, then it was 2, and last year was 1.7, and now it's under 1 attempt. Hopefully that number goes down. But that's been awesome from that. Look, and I don't love all of Milwaukee's stuff. OKC looked for Dame constantly, whether they wanted to get him in a switch and attack him or they would just look for it a little bit. There were certain drives and possessions where if they had the ball in the hands of the guy that was being defended by Dame, that I think that person always had the green light to just go ahead and go because Dame's just not going to hold up. He's a weak link, and it's a problem in a playoff series. You can also, if you can get Brook Lopez away from the hoop, which does, again, happen to a lot of centers, but the side-to-side stuff with him is just, it's just not really there. If you get him far away, you're going to go right past him. And it's one of the Celtics' number one things they'll look for when they go up against Milwaukee and all of this. There's times with Bobby Portis, but I don't really love it. It can be up or down. He can be a heat check, which is great when it's going in. He also can be a ball stopper who gets lost. And I wouldn't say he's a great defensive player either. And Andre Jackson, who is terrific defensively, who's provided them one of these late draft picks to actually be in the rotation, because that was another talking point, is that they weren't hitting on all these late picks, which, again, I think is a pretty high standard to hold the team to or a front office to. Jackson's somebody you could probably ignore. And then you've also got the Middleton factor, where he's been back for 4 games, shooting 26% overall, didn't play last night, not injury, just out because of illness. So all of it I don't love, but peak Giannis I do. He solves a lot of those problems. The block on Caruso, ridiculous. Caruso gets him. He's like, but you didn't get me. Caruso drives to the hoop, thinks he has a chance. Giannis blocks it into the backboard. The ball then ricochets back into his face. And Caruso's like doing, LeBron checks for fake blood. Caruso was sitting there like tapping his face. It's one thing to get rejected and then have the ball also hit you off the face. Isn't great. The Hartenstein block, the Kenrich Williams block at the end. He was incredible. When I was watching OKC Houston, just to put in perspective how great OKC is defensively, when I was watching that game, they had a debate. I think I actually caught some of the halftime show. Look at me. And they were trying to figure out like who would Milwaukee rather play. And Bob Myers was very sane in his approach, going, well, no offense to Houston, you'd always rather play the less talented team because Houston is less talented than Oklahoma City. When you watch them play in that game, the 2 best guys for Oklahoma City are better than anybody else on Houston to this point, the way I see it. Houston could not get the first pass made. It felt like half of their offensive possessions because of how good OKC was defensively. Now, was there part of me that wondered, well, wait, if OKC is playing against Milwaukee, what's their Giannis matchup? And is the idea of Jabari Smith or Atari Eason being thrown at Giannis, like, is that a better matchup? Or am I just saying that because they're taller and it's all fucking pointless because it's Giannis and it doesn't matter? I mean, look, Giannis, you could sit here and say, well, maybe he's a bad matchup for OKC. They tried Jalen Williams 1 on him, toast. They tried Dort on him. Doesn't matter. They tried Caruso on him. That was worse. There was a possession where Giannis decided to bring the ball up because he's doing less of it, I think. I need to look up some of this stuff, but I love that he's not being tasked with bringing the ball up all the time and then just deciding which guy he's going to drive right at. Because, look, there's also Giannis possessions where it's incredibly frustrating. Where like this guy can just run through everybody and then it's a foul on everybody else. Yeah, that's part of it. It sucks. Sorry, I don't have to do it. So he had Dort on his hip. And this doesn't happen to Lou Dort. We love Lou Dort, right? This is a Lou Dort pod. But Dort was trying to like impede his progress physically, and Giannis just didn't matter, man. It looked like could have been Ish Smith. I went 2 syllables on you. It just doesn't matter. So, yeah, maybe. I mean, would Houston have been a better matchup because of Jabari? I let the thought cross my mind, but I'll tell you, like, I don't believe it necessarily. I just think that's what it is. But, I mean, look, this center stuff with OKC, whether it's Hartenstein, Chet's not playing, like they even went Kenrich at the 5 last night, even though Brook and Giannis were out there together. So they don't care. They'll try all sorts of stuff. So, look, if you want to pivot into what this means for OKC, I don't know that it means a ton. We've already talked about the matchup specifically. They lost a game in the NBA last night that has a different title. If you want an OKC defensive stat, just so we understand what we're talking about here because of how special this group is, and it didn't work out last night. So if you look at a team's defensive rating compared to the league average defensive rating and then the differential, right? So how many points below that league average rating is a team at? OKC is fourth in NBA history through 25 games. Teams better than them: 07-08 Celtics, title winner; 15-16 Spurs; 92-93 Knicks; and then OKC, which is 9 points below the league average defensive rating. They are that good. But Giannis was too much for him last night because none of it matters. You can have a plan, you can have the matchups, but if he's willing to just physically dominate you, which he is, because I think more often than not, when you turn on peak Giannis games, he cares more than anybody else that's out on the court. And that's going all the way back to the stuff I used to talk about when they get in those Sixers matchups, when he would have Embiid and he would go right fucking at Embiid. It was like, I don't care. Like, that thing meant something to him. It wasn't about whether or not he would get his shot blocked. It wouldn't be about whether or not it was, I'm looking for a foul or all these different things. He just wanted to know, like, okay, he's supposed to be one of the best. I'm supposed to be one of the best. I'm going to go right at him. It's rare, man. It's rare in today's NBA. And I think it's always just a treat when you get to see somebody doing the kind of stuff he was doing last night. So I could break this down to the shooting variance stuff with OKC, 5 of 32 and threes. They waved the white flag at 77 points. I don't expect to see that. But I think they'd be a little dismissive of just Milwaukee having a really great night. So I don't think it's just, oh, they missed threes, it doesn't matter. But on the other side of it, like the first Houston OKC matchup, well, I don't know if it's the first one, but it was the most recent one before the Cup one where they lost, but there was no Chet. Like, I'm not going to worry about this. They were 8-2 with Chet. They're 9-1, not technically 9-2 after last night with Hartenstein. There's 5 games in there without a center. Again, they don't even care. So could I get a little greedy with OKC and talk about a third on-ball creator? Maybe Chet takes that leap offensively, as we heard this summer. Like, he's going to be that third person there. But look, Giannis, healthy Giannis in the East, if there's any kind of lesson, talking point the day after, it's just, if they're going to look like that in the playoffs, it's a different challenge. Although it's not like I'm going to put them ahead of Cleveland and Boston today. There were concerns this may not happen. Danny Kanell joins us, CBS Sports. Before we even went on to tape this, he was like, "Are we good?" And I said, "I don't know yet. We'll see. We'll see how this goes." I don't know. How did it get so bad between us this year? This felt like it started getting personal.
It reminded me a lot when we yelled at each other in studio at ESPN Radio when you were with Van Pelt and I do my weekly guest segment and come in there and start yelling about the SEC and you'd get all mad and you're like, it was ugly. And I'd walk out of there and be like, I don't know if he's ever going to talk to me again. Like, it got that one. And, there's been a couple, social media exchanges that have been felt like hostility is out there. So I don't know. It's Christmas season though. So hopefully we can put it behind us. But have you recovered though? Are you okay? Because I know you wanted 6 teams in from the SEC. Like, is it okay that we only have 3? Is it okay?
I'm okay with that. And I do remember that one specific hit because we didn't really, I'd like to think we didn't really fight that much when we did the show together, which I think is a challenging thing for people when you're in a room all the time. And like, I took pride in the fact that, like, I think Van Pelt and I only got into like 4 fights in 6 years. But that guest spot you did that day, I do remember it like it was yesterday, because I think at one point, like, Scott and I were we'd had it with you from whatever you were doing that weekend. And we were just going through all of the tweets. And then I think you kind of broke because fighting with you, like, if somebody wants to get into an argument with you, it's not going to happen. I actually respect that you have that power in you where you're just like, I'm not going to engage. Like, I've even talked to your wife about it. She's like, it sucks to argue with him because he just goes, all right, whatever. But you had had it with us, which is fine because we were giving it to you. And you yelled, "Why do you follow me then?" And I was kind of like, well, we do because I think we're friends and we all work together. But yeah, right. You're right. Like, when Bama's down 3-0 and you do the eye emoji 7 minutes into a football game, that was the one Van Pelt was like, "Oh, and the eye emoji, ooh." Like, we were just.
I brought back the eye emoji this year too. I wanted to tag you on that one because when Indiana was playing Ohio State, I've learned, though, that I just leave it vague enough because what was early, Indiana moved the ball right down the field, and I was
They
like,
converted
oh,
three. They had 3 third downs. They converted. It was an
like
incredibly
clockwork.
impressive drive, but it's also a very Ohio State thing to do, where they're like,
Right.
okay, we're going to take the first quarter off all season long. Yeah. All right. So let's get into it then. Fuck it. I'm okay with the SEC not having 6 teams in. I doubt you were listening to what I was doing at the end, but I had kind of come to the realization with Bama where I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to argue this team being in. There's a lot about them that I look at the collective 12 games and go, this is not the default, like, hey, you wouldn't want to play them. Because I know you used to hate that because it was kind of unfair at times when we had the 4-team system where the default was, yeah, okay, but nobody wants to play Alabama. And you're like, okay, but fine. There were years where I were arguing for them and years I was arguing against it. But this year, I just kind of was like, look, I've probably been as critical of Milroe as anybody for the last couple of years. I felt like they got gashed 4 different times. And even though the head-to-head with South Carolina, I think you could have in the committee, if you were in the room, you could talk about the South Carolina LSU loss and go, they got absolutely hosed. We have something real to point to. The head-to-head with Ole Miss bothered me. But look, this committee liked records more than they cared about how the records were achieved. And maybe you like that better than me. But I think the problem that I would have with you is that you would just say no matter what, like, let's just argue against the SEC teams, even if their schedule experience was different than, say, in Indiana or even in SMU. Like, to look at the conference championship games, which I understand and almost admire that they were like, we don't want to penalize a losing team in a conference championship game for playing the extra game. And I like that. But then when the rankings come out and you're like, you can't put Clemson ahead of SMU when they just played each other because you were so married to this idea that the conference championship game isn't going to impact your rankings whatsoever. So look, it's a committee of people. We could sit here every single year and look at a different group and pick apart everything they've done. It's an impossible job to achieve perfection, but there were clear priorities. And I think there are priorities that you would have been aligned with based on 10 years of arguing with you about this.
Correct. But I also felt like the 4 teams that were vying for that 12th spot, which was really Clemson before they, won the ACC title, I would not have made the case for them. I would have put Miami in that conversation, the Hurricanes. Excuse me, it wasn't Clemson. It was Miami from the ACC at 10-2. I thought they should have been given more consideration. And then the 3 9-3 SEC teams. The thing that's sort of the beauty of the system, I guess, I could have taken any one of them, made a very strong case for any single one of them, right? Like, and made a compelling case. It really did come down to a subjective, which team do you like the best? I really think that was the committee. Because I do think the committee got off the hook. And some of it was Ward Manuel backed himself into a corner because he gave out information that he didn't have to by setting his priorities of, we're not going to punish teams that play in the ACC championship game. Like, that's where I thought SMU, had they lost by 3 touchdowns, that would have made him look really bad, because what would you have said then about it? So like Clemson winning, SMU getting it to, respectable, where it's a last second field goal, was huge. I don't think the committee had to make a tough call about almost anything. You could argue the seeding, and I know that's been a hot point of contention, which I don't have that big of a problem with. But like, I thought that's what's going to happen every single year, is these teams are going to be flawed. It's which flaws do you like less, or which ones bother you more, I should say. Because I actually thought South Carolina was that team. Because you remember when Sam Darnold and USC were 9-3 and they played Penn State in the bowl game, and I was like, this is why we need expansion. A team like this that was bad early makes a change. I think it was Max Brown maybe that started early for USC, got benched. They struggled early, and then they were hot at the end of the year. Like, that was one of the teams I was like, this is why we need expansion. So I actually liked South Carolina from the standpoint of which team would you kind of want to see in the playoffs. I would have been okay with that. The thing that was crazy about it is I thought Alabama had the worst resume, and yet the committee ranked them at the top of the 3 SEC teams, and Miami, which I think Miami got the calendar screwed Miami. You cannot lose 2 of your last 3 games and have any chance, which they didn't. But I thought their 2 losses were, quote, good losses against good teams that were, top 30 teams or whatever, top 25 teams, and they weren't ugly. I thought it was just the fact that they lost when they did was what screwed Miami.
Yeah, look, I think Georgia Tech with Haynes King is good. And that's a team, despite him not being there, that still won 7 games. I think if you watch QC throughout the year, like Syracuse is a good football team. The problem is Miami's up 21-0 when everything matters, and that defense, let Syracuse back in. But again, Syracuse is pretty good. I think the problem is that it's the Cal game, it's the Virginia Tech game, it's the Louisville game. I think there were just a bunch of games
Here's
there.
what I have a problem with that, because people were like, oh, they had ugly wins. Isn't that better than losing to Vanderbilt? Or losing games, like actually losing those close games? Like, they did find a way to win, which bothered me when people were arguing about Miami's resume, saying, yeah, they had all these close wins. It was almost like they were dinged worse than if they would have lost the game. Like, it was an ugly win. They'd almost lost it. And yet they only lost twice, and these teams in the SEC lost 3 times. The other thing that really bothered me is we've drawn this arbitrary line at top 25 wins, where that's, again, where I think Miami got screwed. Because I don't think there's a big difference between 15 and 30 or 35 that you could almost interchange some of those teams. And a couple of those wins, Duke did not finish. They didn't get credit for beating Duke. They didn't. Syracuse got in late. Louisville was a team that would have been in like a top 30, top 35 toward a ranking, which I do think those are pretty good wins. Those are significant, and they don't get credit for them when Moore Emanuel says, well, their record versus, they didn't have any top 25 wins. That I thought was a disservice to Miami, but they find these arbitrary lines that to explain away their decision. I get what they're doing, but I thought it was the incorrect way to go about doing it. Like, if you want to go wins over 500 teams, like that to me makes way more sense. When teams with a winning record, like if you want to go there, as opposed to drawing top 25.
I totally agree with you on the top 25 being this line in the sand, as if these teams 26 through 33 aren't just as good as like 17 through 25 and how interchangeable they are. And again, that changes every single year. So as I'm just doing this off the top of my head, you maybe even creep up a few spots even higher. All right, but let me ask you this, because I still think the Clemson LSU thing helps you kind of hammer down the priority of record. And I keep saying schedule experience, but I'm just trying to think of the best phrase to kind of cover what I thought was the different, because with all of this expansion, I knew that was going to happen this summer. It's like, man, it really feels like all these teams that are like, they're going through a completely different in-conference experience. So if SMU is the better team because they're 11-2, despite losing the head-to-head to Clemson, who then is 10-3, Clemson's losses are Georgia week 1, Louisville, they just lost to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then South Carolina, as they were driving for the game-tying field goal, interception ends up being the tip ball. All right, so like 2 of the 3 losses there are Georgia and South Carolina. SMU loses to BYU the beginning of the year before they make the change to Jennings, and then they lose that game to Clemson. And yet the committee keeping them ahead, like how can no one in the committee go, hey, man, like, do you think that's the same? Because it's not. Like, would you agree with what I'm saying here?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I agree with you.
So
I agree with you that Clemson should have been ranked higher than SMU.
Yes, right.
Okay.
So why then, if it's, say, Miami against an SEC team?
Because they didn't have the head-to-head. You know what I mean? Like, that's
only because they didn't have the head-to-head?
What's that?
Only because they didn't have the head-to-head?
No, I absolutely think that's what takes precedent every time when the resumes are similar. If they're very, very close, which is, I would say, 1 loss difference in an extra game.
To me, like, Clemson has the head-to-head, and it's like, oh, and they lost to Georgia and South Carolina. Like, they could have just not played those teams, but they're going to play them. And
right.
I think the Miami part of it, even though I think, you're right to push back on my close win thing, but I think trying to understand the committee is that it was like they were a bit like hanging on by a thread a little bit, and then they have the 2 late losses, and they blow the huge lead to Syracuse. I don't know if enough people would give Georgia Tech credit, give Syracuse enough credit. It's like, hey, if you watch them, you'll like, that's a tough out. That's not in, I have like a stack of 10 to 12 teams every year that are not even in the top 25 that I'll just like. I'm sure it happens to you too, where you're just sort of like them. I think
I fell in love with A&M this year, and I was totally wrong on them the back end.
You did.
I did. I thought they were better than Texas. I thought they were going to beat Texas late with Marcel Reed. I thought he was a difference maker, and then he just He couldn't get it done when it mattered the most.
So
Yeah.
what would have been what would have been the most outrageous scenario to you? Like, what if Indiana had been out and another SEC team had been in?
That would have been wrong. And that was the team that was starting to get that reminded me of the Iowa team that we used to argue about. That was a half yard from getting to the Big Ten championship game and coming up short. Michigan State went on and won it. That was in the Big Ten championship game, right?
That was the Big Ten championship game.
Where they came up short. And it was that was reminding me of that because I thought Indiana, like of all the things that we talk about strength of schedule, and their schedule was easy, right? Not that it was easy. The non-conference was easy and it timed up where the teams that they played, but they did dominate their schedule until they got to Ohio State and Michigan, who were two traditionally good teams. They beat one and they lost to the other. But the other parts of it, like when Missouri was boat racing god-awful teams early this season, they were top 5 in the country. No one ever said, well, they haven't played anybody yet. But they looked impressive because they were putting up massive points and they were it was 89-3 or something was the point differential. Indiana was doing that all season long to lesser opponents, but no one gave them any credit for it. It was oh, well, they're not playing anybody, but they were winning impressively, which if it's a traditional, blue blood, and I'm not even saying SEC, if that was Ohio State, because Ohio State didn't play anybody early either, non-con, but they were boat racing them. So it's oh yeah, we'll put them in the top 10. That's been my biggest thing. And it's not even an SEC bias. It is a brand bias that exists where if you're a team that comes from obscurity or is not a traditional powerhouse, you have to win twice as much as the team that's already there, which it should be the opposite. You should have to prove more if you're that team that has more history, more tradition, more 5 stars, more resources, than opposed to a team like Indiana who's trying to defy the odds.
I totally understand where you're at in Indiana, and you gave me a hard time because the way the video was posted, and then you made it a little dramatic, I think, but where I was saying I inherently give teams the benefit of the doubt. I assume Texas is going to be good because they were in the playoff last year and they had the 3rd most returning players of any team in the SEC. They have their NFL prospect quarterback coming back. They added to the wide receivers. They're littered with draft picks. Their coach is still there because then people were like, oh, you must like Washington too. It's actually Washington, depending on which depth chart you believe, they had 1 or 2 guys returning from a playoff team. All of their NFL guys were gone, including the quarterback, the receivers, and the coach was gone. So yes, I shouldn't have to explain that. I think most sane people understand the difference. And so you're right. Maybe Indiana doesn't. Well, of course, Indiana's not getting the benefit of the doubt bump because they haven't ever been good, as opposed to Missouri that finishes really strong last year. They're on the radar. But it's the same thing with why did you think the Bills would be good this summer? Right. Why did you think the Niners would be good? Maybe you didn't, but I did. So I'm sorry that I do that in college football and it doesn't feel fair to Indiana. But then I'll see when you're doing the DK top 8 earned, not given, and you have Indiana as the number 2 team in the country, that feels kind of given. That feels a bit like I'm doing this for a reason.
They hadn't lost. They were undefeated. They hadn't lost.
They hadn't played. I mean, at least you could argue Missouri at least look, people are going to laugh, but Boston College was top 25 when they beat him. And I don't think Boston College sucked this year.
So I'll give you 2 examples. I'll give you one outside of the SEC. So I'm not picking on Texas now that they're in the SEC. Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a good example of a team that just gets the complete pass because they're Notre Dame and they're a traditional brand, and yet they haven't played anybody. And I think what's interesting about both of them is that Indiana did play both teams that were in the national championship last year. It's not their fault that Michigan sucked and Washington sucked and fell apart. Same thing with Notre Dame. They didn't know Florida State was going to be awful. They didn't know USC was going to be 6-6. They didn't know those things when they scheduled them. I mean, shoot, they had no idea. Army,
but that's irrelevant. I get your point. It's unlucky they didn't get a better. But
why don't Notre Dame and Texas get judged the same way that Indiana does?
Do you think Indiana's better than Notre Dame?
I think they could beat them, absolutely. You don't? So you're laying the points with Notre Dame.
No, I actually picked Indiana in the bracket just because I knew. Because I knew all year long with everything I've said, I was like, they'll end up winning their first playoff game. Maybe Indiana is really good, but they had one chance to prove it, and it was a disaster. And yet the committee was totally fine with it. And that's where I think it's not an Indiana SEC thing. It's if like Indiana Clemson, it'd be a perfect example. If SMU ends up winning that game in overtime, right?
Yep.
Look, the fourth loss with Clemson, it wouldn't even be a question, but say that was Clemson's only loss, right? Well, then the committee wouldn't have dinged him because they clearly aren't doing anything with the conference championship games. It has nothing to do with Indiana. I just think everything that I'd said for years when we had heard at first was going to go to 12. I'm always going to have a problem with a team that I don't feel like has one good win after 12 games playing for a national championship, and I'm going to feel that way every year.
But so then to flip it back on Notre Dame, why don't you have a problem that they had all these tests and they had a test they completely failed against Northern Illinois, where if Indiana had run let's say they had beaten Ohio State, clearly that's like there's a signature win. But even if they had lost to who's early on their schedule, Western Illinois or FIU. FIU was a bad team this year. Like if they had lost that game, they're done. They're done for the season because they're Indiana. And I thought Notre Dame was going to be done after they lost that one. Like that game still kind of bothers me because I think that should be a season like devastating type of loss where the regular season matters. Now they dominated, they took care of their business, and they don't play in a conference, so they kind of get that pass sitting on the sidelines. But like Indiana doesn't survive that. If they lose to Northern Illinois, that is the main narrative around Indiana for the rest of the year. Like,
well, they had just won the week before on a Saturday night in College Station against number 20 Texas A&M, who I think, despite the disappointing close to the season and the non-ranking, I think it's okay to say that we think Texas A&M is a tough team to beat. So I understand what you're saying there with Indiana, and I could be even more unfair saying, well, they have wins against two other top 25s in Navy and Army, but I know what you're going to do if I say that. They've got to win against Louisville. You know, the time of being ranked versus who ends up being ranked, who ends up being ranked is the more important part of the conversation. But there's at least a 4-0 thing that you can point to there with Notre Dame that you can't do with Indiana. I think my biggest issue with all of this stuff is we're getting further and further away from just, hey, I think this team is good and I think this team isn't as good. What's the point of watching?
Like, that was your point with Georgia and Oregon, like just have them play. It was like, I think these are the two best teams. Was that the point you were trying to make with that?
Well, that one also got clipped out a little bit where essentially I went with McShay and was just like, let's go through all the old systems. Like if it was the BCS, it would be this. How would you feel? If it were the 4, how would you feel? If it were 6 with the first 2, I know you were a big, let's have it be 6, 1 and 2 get buys, all 5 conferences, Power 5s represented when we still had the Pac-12, and then an automatic bid to the Group of 5 team. That was you. Egalitarian. But people based on your politics are surprised that you were that fair and wanted that many people to be represented, so many voices to be heard from. So that was, and McShay had basically given up on the segment and hated me for even going through the whole point. But my clip that made it out was if I only wanted that. I thought for this year, with everything that happened around it, if it ended up just being Georgia and Oregon, that to me would have been a better representation of like who fought their way through the season. Because look, I don't care about the Georgia 2 losses when I think about the teams they played this year. Like, what's Indiana's record with Georgia's schedule?
And shout out, was it Ceruti that clipped that? Because that's a genius clip. Like that thing goes viral, gets lots of views. It was awesome. But like that would have bothered me from the standpoint. And that was who the BCS would have liked to be, because I know the BCS system, people put out those would have been the final 2 in the BCS, right?
Yeah. By the way, for this year was my point that it probably, like, I would have gone, all right, I wouldn't have had if it was still the BCS system doing the show, whatever, I would have come in that Monday being like, I'm actually okay with it because I don't think this third team's left out. It does not mean there's a million other years where you're like, this is ridiculous and I can't believe we only have these 2 teams. The clip did not work that way, but whatever.
But I actually agree with you. Like, if that was the BCS, I don't think there's outrage from anybody. Like I don't think Notre Dame is outraged because, again, we just talked about their schedule. Penn State could have, beaten Oregon to have the chance. Like,
they would have just lost.
I agree with your point.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think there would have been outrage. I love that we have 12 this year because I think it's a great year for it. Like last time we talked, it was something like, I think there's more parity. And I do think we're going to see upsets, which is probably, and I picked 2 out of the 4, which will probably be the wrong 2, and then it'll be the wrong bracket. Then you're screwed.
Let's go through it then.
Yeah. What's that?
Let's go through it then, because I feel like I've spent a lot of time on recapping stuff the audience has already heard from both of us a ton. So let's go through your bracket right now. What do you have?
So I've got the one upset. Again, all these upsets, I have no idea. Like I've been horrible picking games, and I think for whatever reason it's just been bad. But I think all of them could be upset, so you're fine the two. I like Clemson in the first one. I think Clemson is it's like the quintessential Dabo Sweeney, us against the rest, y'all. Like y'all get like no one believes in us, and I can picture him after the game again, like throwing it back in everybody's face. I think Cade Klubnik can get it done in a place where he won the state championship against Quinn Ewers. But this is probably more about Quinn Ewers. Something's wrong with him. Something's off. Like, I don't know if it's still the oblique. I don't know if it's the ankle. Maybe it's all of it. But if you look at his arm talent, this is a guy that was, touted as being one of the strongest arms in the country. The way he's like blooping the balls and like just putting a lot of air under him. When was the last time you saw him rifle a ball where it was like, oh, that's a ball that jumps off your arm? I haven't seen it this year. And it also goes to the depth of target, statistics that are out there. They are calling plays differently for him. So like, I think Clemson's defense, if they can keep him in check, which he's been struggling, I don't think it's that hard to do. I think this could be ripe for an upset. So I do like Clemson in this one. I think there's a lot more pressure on Texas too. A team that, again, their two biggest games they lost against opponents that were equal to them or potentially better.
Yeah, look, I agree on the Ewers part of it. Not to say that he hasn't taken a few deep shots, like when they were trying to come back in the field goal, like he was getting the ball out, but it just doesn't seem like he's the same, and the numbers would back it up. Like there's a very clear line in the sand of like when he comes back from the injury, it just hasn't been the same. But I think lost in all this kind of stuff with Texas losing to Georgia twice is that I feel like their defense is just completely overlooked. That defense is filthy.
It is.
What they did to A&M, I know the score is 17-7, but the only 7 are on the pick six. They had the other, like, it probably should have been give them 2 field goals instead of 14 in the red zone because they had the 2 turnovers, but it's probably like a 21-0 game at their place, so that defense, I think, is pretty special. And even though Clemson's offense has clearly figured some things out after some years there where you're like, what is wrong with these guys? All right, that's cool. Tennessee,
I like
Ohio
the under
State.
in that game, too, because of what you're talking about. I think Clemson's defense will have some success. Cade Klubnik's legs, I think, could play a part. And Bryant Wesco has been like, he's just coming off a huge game. If that could be a confidence booster, he's kind of a difference maker on the outside. But he's been very erratic and injured some of the year, too.
No, he's a stud. I mean, it's always weird when there's certain programs you're like, where's the Clemson receiver? Where's the difference maker? I mean, that whole run was just littered with dudes that were better than everybody's defensive backs. I think the Tennessee line is huge here. And I can't figure, like, there's a very classic, like Ohio State, just when you're doubting them. But I feel like this is kind of 2 years of, they're not really this physical dominating present. I know they've had the O-line issues, but Tennessee has some dudes on the front where I would expect this to be a competitive game. It's 7.5. I just don't see an Ohio State blowout against Tennessee.
So I think if you're Jim Knowles, you are selling out to stop Dylan Sampson, who's been one of the best backs in the SEC. And you're saying, good luck, Nico. You're on the road. You're in the cold. And you've been around, you've been up and down this year. You're young. Like I put it all on him. I think you bring pressure, and maybe it's pressure to stop the run, but you put your secondary on some islands and take the risk and say go ahead and do it. So, and I think that's what they will, and I think they'll have some success doing it. Like it wasn't like, I don't know, the Michigan game to me, I'm not that bothered by. I absolutely hated the way that Ryan Day approached that game, like putting more pressure on everybody. Like, this is like the death of my dad if we lose. Like, you could sense a pressure and a stress around Ryan Day at media days this summer in Indianapolis because of that game. Just like had so much buildup. I thought they played tight. Now, how do you fix that? I think 1, it's not Michigan, so that helps. 2, everyone's doubting you now. So you tell them that in the locker room. It's not you're supposed to win this game. We have to win it. Even though they're favorites, you're telling your players, everybody thinks you're done. Everybody thinks you're no good. So you're trying to play some of those mind games with them. But again, I think this comes down to, I hope they don't try to prove their physicality, because I think they did that somewhat against Michigan. Just be who you are. You're physical, but your offensive line has been banged up. Let Jeremiah Smith get off, like give him chances. Let Will Howard throw, work in the run game with your backfield, but you've got to call a game that at least opens it up somewhat and a little bit more aggressive, because I thought they played a little bit tentative. And it's hard because Will Howard had a couple picks and he's been up and down, but they need to play aggressive and open up this offense, or else it will be a tight game. And if they're going to, and good luck trying to do it against Tennessee's front. Like, I think they're going to have to put it on Will Howard's shoulders, which if you get the version that you had against Oregon on the road, like, then they could win and cover this thing and win by 10 points or more.
They win the whole thing. I mean, if they
Yeah.
were going to get that kind of, and I actually completely agree with you on just opening it up. Like, you've got all these receivers. I feel like in the Michigan game, you're like, I would be looking for Jeremiah Smith every single new set of downs. Like,
Yep.
just, I don't even care. 50-50 ball, just throw it up and let it get a chance. Like, instead, okay, cool, we're just running to the Michigan defensive line here again.
And if you go back at the game that comes to mind for me is Alabama, Tennessee, because Milroe missed a few guys that were wide open. I think you can get them. I think you can get Tennessee's secondary. And I also think that's the game where I'm like, good luck, Nico, because he missed some open guys too. He had the great touchdown pass to win the game, but there were a lot of plays left on the field by both those quarterbacks. That's why I think you got to challenge them. I think you got to put it on some of your playmakers on the outside.
This is the best, and McShay and I have talked about this, even after the Oregon loss, is the best I felt about Penn State in years.
What do you think about Pribula leaving?
Well, I think it sucks, but look, here's a very good example. So you see Bo Pribula, the backup, who they use in all these different ways, and he's just fun. You can tell, like, this guy, who knows what he's going to be like if he's dropping back and throwing 30 passes, but it was just a nice thing to have because he's a stud and he's a sick athlete. So when I saw the headline, I was really disappointed. I'm like, he's already transferring. And then I read even more about it, and I feel like he was like an impossible spot because of the way the portal thing is aligned. That it's like, you could wait, you could have some agreement in theory, but we just know how things go, man. And would a college that he wants to go to keep his seat warm with it all sort of agreed upon, and then he gets to stay at Penn State? So I think it has way more to do with the rules and the circumstances and the NIL and the agents and all the stuff flying around, that he was almost, by today's standards, forced to do something that it seemed pretty clear that he did not want to do. So I had a problem with it when I read the headline. I had far less of a problem with it once I researched it more.
Clearly, it's the system's fault, right? The calendar is so out of whack. It makes no sense. The fact that you have signing day the week of the championship games, the fact that the portal opens December, it makes zero sense whatsoever. I still wish you would have stayed. Like, I still think you find a way to work it out. You've got agents that are, it's like any free agency where you see guys sign at 12:01. Like, you could have the deal going. Devin Brown's in the portal for Ohio State. He's finishing. Like, he's like, I'm going to finish. I thought Dillingham at Arizona State handled this the best. Because the other thing I don't know, James Franklin might have been like, oh, you want to leave? Go. I don't want you. Like, some coaches might have that. I have no idea if that's Franklin's mindset, but he might have, got wind of this and said, see you later. So I hated it from the perspective. I hate the love letters. I just can't take them anymore. Like, when, you profess your love for your teammates and then you're gone. I don't love the optics of that. Just hit the portal, like, go get yours, go get paid. But I don't know. That was the thing that bothered me more. But it's very clearly it's the portal is the problem, the calendar of it. But what's crazy is they've been using him. Like, and I think that means maybe you see even more Tyler Warren, because they would have a package for Pribula to come in and run, be a little bit quarterback run game in the red zone, which I think Tyler Warren will take some of those reps. But we did see Drew Aller get hurt against Wisconsin. And last year we saw Malik Murphy exit before Texas played in the playoffs, and it was fine. Quinn Ewers was healthy. That's, to me, what becomes really problematic, is if something happens to Aller, you're in big trouble if that happens. And that's where I wonder if he would regret.
Like, I don't feel like I ever saw enough from him to even know what he would be like dropping back for 30 games. But it's an awesome wrinkle.
Are you and McShay sold on Aller?
I like him more than Carson Beck. I like him more than this version of Ewers. I like him. Yeah, I do. Last year, the no interception thing was, to me, a huge problem, because it just meant he was like scared to death. And I don't really love their outside. This is 2 years. I mean, other than Tyler Warren, the receiver situation at Penn State's been pretty disappointing. Look, I don't think this first round draft class is going to be really weird, because it's going to be the two guys, and then there's going to be a gap, and then I see Milroe going in first round mocks, which I can't believe. I see Beck in some of them still. Wigman had one of the top grades going in as a draft prospect, and now he's out of there too. So I know Aller said he's coming back, and people were kind of making fun of him, like, "Oh, you're coming back?" Like no one even cared. I like him. I'm not in love with him, but I like him better than a lot of the other options, and now he's not even an option.
Right. So I felt like the USC game was his breakout game, and then it's sort of like you didn't see that again until the Oregon game. Like there were a couple big plays he had to make, and it was I know they were trying to come back, so it put more on his shoulders.
The fourth down play for him, like
insane.
I don't think Penn State's making that fourth down.
No,
I just like they're not going to get.
Yeah.
So, I know everybody wants perfect all the time with some of these guys, but between the SC game, I think even the Minnesota game, and then certainly the Oregon game, like again, I wouldn't have my head of the other two guys certainly, but I like him. Like to me, he's not a concern anymore. Like to me, he's a massive, maybe not massive, but he's just an advantage. Like you've got a guy back there who's played a ton, who's been through a lot. Because I thought he was shot last year, just shot.
Yeah.
So SMU, any chance in a non-Kanell way?
No. This is the game I probably have the biggest fear of. Like I don't. This is probably the least likely one I would say is an upset. SMU on the road in the cold. Can they the physicality? And they've done a fantastic job, like getting up to speed in the ACC. Like they did recruit for, and they hit the portal to try to boost up their offensive and defensive line. And they did a pretty good job against Clemson. Shutting down their run game. But I think trying to shut down Singleton and Allen's going to be a completely different ballgame. Like, and you were talking about, like, Penn State, the physicality of Penn State, I think, could be a problem. Now, Rhett Lashley is a great offensive mind. I worry about sort of a quarterback like Jennings who likes to get out of the pocket a little bit if it is cold weather. Like, I don't see this one as one of the ones I would circle for an upset.
Jennings is going to wear you out. Like he's going to wear out your defensive line, even if you're more talented than the opponent, because you're constantly dealing with this guy keeping plays alive in ways that it's just, every time I've watched SMU, I go, how did he end up there?
Right.
Like that's the launch point. Like how did he end up in this play over there? But look, Penn State pushed Oregon's D-line all night long. The problem is that Oregon was going to get the football back. But I like Penn State. I like them in this tournament, if you would let me say that. All right, final one here, Indiana, Notre Dame, and then we get your pick for the overall thing, and I'll show you mine as well. I know that I was really hoping for the Indiana SEC matchup just because I wanted it. I wanted to see it. And then it feels a bit like, oh, well, they get Notre Dame. And I think all of us are a little I don't know if we're all guilty of it, so I don't want to speak for everybody, but just because of like the way you think of the cliche Notre Dame thing, it's like, oh, well, Indiana doesn't have to face like all these crazy SEC athletes and they get Notre Dame. But it's like, okay, but if you watch Notre Dame's offensive line this year against Indiana's D line that has like the one guy that's graded as a second rounder. So this may be, all of us are just kind of falling into this bunch of Midwest dudes, like perfect matchup for Indiana. And it might actually be a bad matchup for him because of that O-line for Notre Dame.
It could be. I think Notre Dame is too one-dimensional. I don't love Riley Leonard as a passer.
What happened to him? Because you loved him at Duke. Is that guy gone?
No. So I love him as a young, like he's a great kid. He's a great athlete. I thought he would continue to progress as a passer. Like I thought it might have been in him, and then you give him better weapons and like you give him some opportunity. I just don't. I think he's got his limitations. So Dusty on the radio called the game against Clemson where he upset, where Duke beat Clemson when Riley Leonard was there. And I remember him saying, and I asked him about it during the game, even Duke's coaches were like, hey, he needs to really work on his passing game. Like the arm strength is a little limited. He's got to take that next step forward. And this year he's been okay, but I think they're too one-dimensional. Like if you can take away their run game, which is a big if, but I do think Indiana's defense is better than we think. Like they did a pretty good job against Ohio State. Like they didn't lose that game because Ohio State was just
I saw your tweet on that. You also
the tweet was definitely misleading, but it's not like they got pushed around on the field, right? I was definitely leaning into my narrative, and I had some stats to back it up.
Well, they were flawed because as soon as you posted it, I'm like, why is he doing this? He played. like you were looking at total yardage, which conveniently leaves out the punt return and the fact that Ohio State was basically down 3 possessions because of the turnover short field and the return on special teams. So like when you do that, I'm like, I can't believe he's doing this.
But they But they did a pretty good job against, like, they didn't get run all over. I think people thought they were going to get, Travion Henderson, Quinshon, they're just going to bowl them. They're just going to run through them. I don't think they did that.
I thought Ohio State was like, these guys have no chance. None whatsoever. There was one drive Ohio State had.
So that's what concerns me. So I thought they had no chance from Curtis Rourke. Like, that offense looked completely shut down. I thought their defense actually played okay. Their offense, I thought, was embarrassing. Like, that was what I thought was, oh boy, they can hang with these big boys. That's the biggest challenge, I think, in this game for Indiana is, can they score points? I think they'll have success, like control and not giving up a boatload of points to Riley Leonard and company. And Jeremiah Love's banged up. That to me is a pretty significant potential, injury that Notre Dame's dealing with.
Yeah. But wait,
so you sound like you like Notre Dame, but you're picking Indiana.
I'm putting on my bracket. The bracket's just a work of art. But look, like Jadarian comes in for Love, and he has 100 yards behind that O-line against SC. But the problem, I think you're right. Well, you're not. I don't think you are right about the one-dimensional part of it. Maybe they were just smoking all of these teams. It didn't matter. They're going to grind everybody out. But their top 2 receivers combined for 60 catches. 2 guys.
Right.
60 catches this season.
Right. And like that to me is, but in Indiana, they have to take away the run and make Riley Leonard beat you. And what else is going to be interesting is the weather in this game, because that's where I don't picture Indiana lining it up and running. So Curtis Rourke has to have a good game, because I think Surratt's a really good receiver. He had a couple drops against Michigan. They didn't do. But Curtis Rourke was running for his life against Ohio State. Like, they have to do a better job protecting him, which he might. But they had schemed up some things early. Like, they've got to continue that, offensive success. And I think it has to come through the air, which makes the conditions pretty interesting. If it's cold and snowy, which this one is the coldest and snowiest of all the forecasts, I believe. Like, I don't think that favors, like, if it's ugly at game time and it's cold, windy, and snowy, I am hating my pick of Indiana upsetting Notre Dame.
Yeah, because that'll be another thing. It's like, you could talk to people like, oh, this is perfect for Indiana. Like, they're like, this is exactly what Notre Dame's going to want.
Right.
Like, cool. We're just going to line it up, try to run it at you the entire time. All right. What was your final 2 then? And who do you have winning the whole thing?
I guess call me a prisoner of the BCS. I have Oregon, Georgia in the final, which I'm kind of bothered by, because when I made this, so I've stuck with the same bracket, have not wavered since like 15 minutes after the bracket. They put you on, on TV and say, hey, who are you going with? And I was like, all right, I'm rolling with these. And did not know what was going on with Carson Beck. And I guess to some extent we don't still, but I just think their defense is good. I think the path is pretty good. Like, so I have Indiana advancing through Notre Dame. And even if it's Notre Dame, I still would like Georgia and them match up with or without Carson Beck, and maybe even a little bit better with Gunnar Stockton back there. And then against Penn State, I don't trust Penn State to be able to do much against Georgia's defense. That would have to be a Drew Aller, like, come of age type of moment. And maybe he has it.
Declares for the draft.
That one.
I changed my mind. I'm out of here. I have Oregon over Penn State.
Love it.
The bracket, I was just trying to like feel it and go through it. But I could also see myself after the first rounds of games, like, kind of changing my mind about, but whatever. I had to put in my bracket. I had to do it. Okay. A couple things I wanted to close with here. I know that your camp was really excited about the Cal Auburn result, the USC result against LSU.
Great opening weekend. Yeah.
Right. It's a great opening weekend. Do you know the final records of the Power Four against each other? Do you know those?
I've seen them posted. I've seen them out there. I don't have them memorized like you do.
So the SEC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC against the other 3.
Yeah.
ACC 10 and 12. But give it to them. They schedule them up.
That's right.
22 games.
That's actually not that bad. I would take that all day long.
10 and 12 is not bad. Hey, there were years I was arguing, but hey, look at the ACC draft pick totals. Like, how come they're not? It was frustrating. Like, what's up with this ACC? Look at all of these draft picks. because there was a bunch of years ago where they were
and they were a lot of them in the first 3 rounds, which are more important.
Yeah,
they were better players. Yeah.
The Big 12 5-9, the Big 10 7-9, lesser games scheduled, but as you could see, any Big Ten fan that never defended the Pac-10 when they played the 9th conference game that somehow is thrilled to get an extra game against the bottom of the Big Ten, as if that's some massive statement of competition. 7-9. The SEC went 13-6. So
one of those is against Wake Forest when Ole Miss demolished them, which
do you want to do
Forest
that?
Did cancel.
Do you want to go through the ones that aren't that good?
So what do you want? What do you want? To congrats?
No,
you want a cookie?
I just remember earlier in the year, the Cal Auburn one was like a big, this conference might not be that good. I also saw, no, I'm not done yet.
Okay.
I also saw another tweet after the Heisman where you had said,
that was a good
we
one.
looked through all the finalists that
10 guys
did not have any SEC names, right?
Just
and you said in a very coy way, notice anything missing?
I mean, I thought the best conference, you just called them like, well, I thought they'd have the best players. They'd have some playmakers.
So is your position that Heisman winners, Heisman finalists reflect conference strength? And if you don't have those, perhaps conference weakness? Is that what you're saying?
That could be a pretty good hypothetical. I like that scenario. You've never heard me say the SEC is not the strongest. I've just said we have to stop.
You do a bad job of saying it.
How much better they are. Like the dumbest thing I think the ACC and Big 12 did was passing on the deal that would have been 3-3, automatics, 3 from the SEC, 3 from the Big 10, 2 from the Big 12, 2 from the ACC, 1 automatic qualifier and 1 at large and 1 group of 5. And then that is guaranteed. Like if you're going to get screwed, which they are because they don't have the money, they don't have the resources, just tell me how bad you're going to screw me. And they said no, which is why they almost got 1 team in this year. I thought it was a horrible decision to pass on that deal. And they had it on the table and said no.
I think our longstanding issue is that for a decade plus of doing this, you say it's the best and then you shit on it for 4 months.
That's to make sure that we don't have 6 teams in a 12-team playoff. That's why.
Do you think you're important enough? Like, when you send a tweet that's just pure propaganda,
right?
That you think maybe one mind can be changed today?
Absolutely. Definitely. And if it gets to Ward Manuel, all I need is somebody to just tag Ward Manuel on it or any of the other committee members just to bring their attention to it. So I feel like that is my goal in life.
I think it is. I think that's psychotic to think that you have that much influence. That when you send the tweet, I'm like, I think he thinks maybe there's one person in the committee. He's like, yeah, because your target is impossible to hit. It's the best, but then you're vague about what the gap is. So I imagine on your tombstone, you'd want it to say they weren't that much better.
Yes, that's exactly what I would put. That would be it. By the way, I think we can agree on this. And we cannot agree on one thing. If I was in that committee room, we would need to televise it because that would be entertainment and you would watch. You and I both should be in that room making the cases because then that would be must-see television. And you could take the pro SEC stance. I'll take the pro everybody else.
I would take the pro truth stance. I would argue
so that's
about
all of you. All
schedules.
Facts.
I would argue about what I saw previous Saturdays.
Was there somebody on there that was in the SEC? Did I lie about that stat?
You fight earned bias with delusional bias. That's where I think there was the disconnect. And it almost got personal. We didn't even know if we were going to have you on again, but I'm glad that we did, buddy.
I absolutely hate that Boise State is sitting there with a 3 seed and a bye.
So do
That's the dumbest thing we've ever done. It's
now we're talking.
Yes. And hey, I have been Group of 5 Danny, right? 2017 UCF national champs. Let's go. But to give them a 3 seed is an absolute joke. That will get it changed though, because it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But that I don't even know if people got that upset about it. It's ridiculous that they're getting that much of an advantage.
We spent so much time on the SEC in Indiana, and then the ACC thing of them. The bracket came out. You had guys going, excuse me? Like, what's going to happen? When it was automatic bids for those scenarios, I didn't like it either. And I don't like it for anybody. It's simply, we will have a year where some team has 4 losses that wins their conference. I mean,
Right.
not likely, but you're going to have a really bad conference winner, or in this case, the group of 5. Where can we hear you and Dusty so the listeners know?
Sirius XM, 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Cover 3 Pod 2, CBS Sports. And now, for the first time on TikTok, at D Kanell. Watch out for some fire takes and some pretty cool dances.
Dance videos and college football. What else could a gal want? Thanks, Danny.
You got it.
He is the head coach of the University of Vermont's men's soccer team, which is now national champions. And he joins us, it looks like, from the facilities up there in Vermont. It's head coach Rob Dow. Thanks for doing this, man. Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on. Super excited to be here.
So your background, I've gone through it and looked at it. And I know when you took over a few years ago, and you've actually been kind of building to this moment. So maybe before we get into the full timeline stuff, I mean, it's only been a couple of days. Like, what's it been like?
Well, I've got to be home and spend some time with my 3-week-old son, cuddling with him and this type of thing. So immediate distraction. Other than that, we had a really cool police escort from the airport to the campus, and everyone stopping on the side, got out of their cars, waving, cheering. Kind of feels like we're a big deal here. So I know that'll continue. And Vermont's such a small place, and that's what makes us unique. And their fans are amazing. The state is so supportive, and we'll bask in this for a few more days.
Yeah, I can only point to like a couple of the memories that you have. When you go to a place like Vermont, it's really special. But then I travel all over the country for college football, and sometimes buddies would come with me and they go, "Did we make the wrong decision?" And I'm like, I wouldn't trade it for anything. But it's just, there's levels to it. And whether it was the Frozen Four with St. Louis team when I was a junior, I remember just all of us sitting around all day watching it, and it doesn't go UVM's way. Obviously, with Brennan and that UVM team beating Syracuse, like for a tournament win for that basketball program. And then, Becker's had it rolling, and he's a friend. But to win a national championship at the University of Vermont, it's such a different level of probably what all of our expectations were as alums. Like, a lot of us don't even, like, it hasn't even sunk in for us, realizing that it actually happened this week. And I think that's what makes it more special at a place like Vermont. And I obviously I'm biased, but when your alums and the entire state, like, they're just not used to this is a whole nother level of accomplishment that I think a lot of people just would never assume could happen there.
Yeah. I don't need to remind Becker that, getting a new gym is important, or some of our facilities aren't like the ACC facilities, for example. But it's about the people. And, that's what lasts, and I think that's what's super special about the fact that, we have this national championship. We all have this together, and we're going to be able to, get together in 5 years and 10 years and 15 years and still talk about being at the Final Four and traveling to San Diego, Long Island, Pittsburgh, North Carolina, and doing it all together, and, sticking to our trivia before our meals to see who's going to eat first, who gets extra dessert, those types of things. Like, and the people here in Vermont, they're just have the right values about support and community. And we're lucky to have them as our 12th man on the field.
So you take out Denver. I'm watching the game, and again, I'm not a huge soccer guy, which I'll expose myself here pretty quickly, but I know the deal has been the cardiac catamounts this entire run, but you're down 1-0, right? Marshall goes up 1. I think you got the equalizer at the 81st minute. In those minutes when you're down 1-0, like, I know you're thinking, okay, of course we have a chance, but like, what's really going through your head?
that I need to schedule an echocardiogram after the national championship game. That's not a joke. But anyway, um, look, at that point, you look at how we've been able to tie games by being down goals throughout the regular season. We've won in overtime. We've won in, dramatic PK overtime. We've got PKs that we've won in the semifinal. We upset the 2 seed at Pitt. ACC powerhouse, the wins of regular season. Like we've been through the most difficult moments, and going down a goal, it just doesn't faze us. We're just focused on the next play, and we have this thing. Every player was responsible for reading Legacy from the All Blacks book throughout the summer. And one of their the biggest thing within their team culture is that in the most difficult moments, their team needs to stay blue-headed. And that's, raise your awareness, increase your concentration and focus, but don't lose your cool. And we connected to that. That was one of the biggest things. We sat around in preseason up at J Peak to talk about our favorite parts of the book. And, there was a consensus that that's something that from our leaders in the team, we wanted to follow this season. Who knew it would take us to a national championship? But okay, there's some tactics that we needed to change. We put Max Murray up top and out of the center back. But we are confident we could score. We could score. We could score at any moment, any period of the game. As a coach, for my health, I always want to score first. But I was never scared to go down, and I knew neither of our players.
Tied up extra time, and the game winner. And as I'm watching, and I'm trying to figure out. Again, I didn't grow up with it, so I don't profess to even understand what you're doing. But like the right side to Kissel, it just felt like, okay, if he can win one of these, then we have a chance. And then the game winner is you're watching it and you can see the guy defending him is spent. Because, so many of the kids are just exhausted out there. And you're like, if he can actually win this ball, did you see that play developing just thinking, wait, this could actually be it? Because it almost played out in slow motion on television, but it just felt like all he needs is to win this ball. And then I think they're going to get it.
Yeah, it's been fun to go back and keep watching. I watched it a million times. Our media team here at the university got some really, really good shots instead of the NCAA. I gotta turn off the phone, because I'm going to bed way too late. Look, part of the tactics of the game is we wanted to find 1v1 matchups against Marshall center backs. Now, it's so rare in soccer now and how organized teams are to get breakaways. And you're right, the attrition of the game, the back and forth play, put us in more of those moments. And on the flip side, we were defending, in 1v1 matchups at the top of our box too. And Max Kissel's the fastest player, recorded speed within our team. They wear these trackers to figure that out. And when he get the head nod past, I thought the defender would foul him. I thought he would, it would be a red card, but it's overtime. When he, kind of missed that tackle, the sliding tackle, and got through. It was like the longest, 3 or 4 seconds ever. And but Maxi Kissel's a goal scorer. He's a goal scorer. And we put him on in key moments to get that job done. He was certainly blue-headed in the moment.
Yeah, and then to add the extra into it where he's just like, let me make sure I just set myself up instead of just spazzing, that you're like, okay, it's just me and the goalie. And he's like, no, totally calm. Let me just get you offline here and the game winner. What was it like in the locker room right after that?
I gotta do media right after it. I didn't get in right away, but after that, we went in and the guys were still on the walls, on the ceiling. we sing this song after every win. Hey, baby. I think you heard it on our social medias. We've been doing it for like 14 years or so after every single win. But to sing this, to sing that song for a national championship and like the water bottles are flying. I wish we had some champagne in the locker room, but we waited for that at the hotel. It's, it's epic. I can't replace it. Never thought it would be that amazing. I just so happy that like the guys like Zach Barrett and Max Murray, who could play at any other Division I program, decided to do their 5th year and stay at Vermont because it means more. This program means the most to them. That's why we were there. The retention. You talk about the transfer portal. Everyone wants something greener on the other side, and these guys said, no. We want to leave something special before we depart UVM, and that they did.
Do you think your background, whether it's Nova Scotia or playing at Maine, do you think that helps you understand Vermont better than somebody from another part of the country?
Yeah, Halifax, Nova Scotia. It is, it's a big city, but I grew up in this little town called Cole Harbour. There's a few famous hockey players from there. One of them, Sidney Crosby, but
heard of him.
Yeah, heard of him. No, and when he comes back, to our small town, he does a lot for our hockey association, and just like our whole, this is one of the things I said when I interviewed for the job, Vermont, is that I grew up with I would say like a community center that had 2 sheets of ice, and a library and a pool. And after every day of school, this is just where I went, hang out with my friends, open skate, hop, free swim, this type of thing, or do my homework in the library. But this type of facility like brought the community together. And I compare that to what Patrick Gym, the Gutterson Arena is, to Chittenden County. And I said, that's all I want for my kids, is to grow up around these leaders, these mentors of catamounts. And I've certainly been able to do that. But whether it's like this community center, but it's just a state that embodies like how important it is to establish a community environment, to be a great neighbor. And we're lucky not to have pro sports here in Vermont. The Catamount country is lucky, but the persistent, pride in the green and gold is something really special. And but it's built on people that have great values and just want to bring people together and celebrate something that's really cool.
You had been on the staff, for the audience that doesn't know this. You've been there for over a decade, and I know the previous head coach Jesse had talked about like, hey, Rob's kind of the guy. Like tactically, our recruiting efforts, like as he was on his way out, and then you get the job. Like I was going back and reading the articles this morning. Like he was. I love when compliments are specific, because it's very easy to just compliment people in just sort of broad, vague terms. And hey, this is what you're supposed to say. But everything he was saying about you was incredibly specific. But in that down period of not knowing who the head coach would be, I've known Jeff Schulman, the AD, for a long time. You meet with him, and then what did you do to the team? I know you know what they did, but I want you to share it. Like, as the team, what Schulman did to the team to introduce the new head coach.
Right before I went in my interview with Jeff, I actually split my pants open. And that was like, so it was like great icebreaker. Nothing else could go as bad as that. I sat down really quick. The lobby was like laughing their heads off. And Jeff just couldn't understand why. He found out a little bit later. Anyway, yeah, look, Jesse Cormier is a huge mentor to me and continues to offer that. And he's a really special person to me. And what a man manager he is, and the psychological part of supporting and growing players to be this like really, really united team took a ton from him around that. And as an alum, he's an alum, and he explained to me how important UVM athletics is to the state of Vermont, and him being a Vermonter. So look, I appreciate those comments from him, but a very important person to me and how I grew as a coach. I heard, like I wasn't there for the announcement that I was going to be the guy. I sure hope I was going to be. I had my firstborn child, Hanson, was I think a month and a half old at that time. And Jesse's calling me like, "Hey, man, you want to come down to Florida with me? The Florida Gulf Coast?" And I was like, "Oh, my wife's a New England girl. I don't know if I could convince her." And there's just my wife and I made this decision that we're going to go all in, for this job at Vermont. And I think that meant a lot to Jeff in this process. So he told me it was, going to get the job. And he actually went in to the team first. And it was this called the Bostwick room before I did our renovation here. Had the whole team sitting down, and he announced that, Rob Dow was going to be the next head coach at University of Vermont men's soccer team. The team erupted, and we're so happy. And I was so lucky that the team supported me. They did a lot, to help me, in the interview process. And that was lucky, just a lucky guy.
And that was almost 8 years ago, and here you are national champs. So I think it worked out for everybody. So as you said at the very top of this, and everybody knew because it was part of the broadcast, it's not just the change in your life, the mustache, the tournament mustache here, which I got to tell you is working. I'll go out now and I'll look around and be like, I might be the only guy without just the mustache now. So mustaches have been back in for a while. But you just had a kid. You just said it. You've got a newborn at home, and then boom, you're off to the plane to go win a national championship. Does this mean that you're a national champion everywhere except within your household?
I'm in super debt, like in the household. My wife had no problem passing my son off to me at 1:00 this morning. Yeah, no. Like, it takes a village. It really does. My wife deserves a ton of credit, the support. Look, Russell is my 3-week-old son's name. He was born on Thanksgiving morning, and I left the 9:25. Had a couple hours from. Then we left on a plane for San Diego at 4 p.m. So perfect timing. Could have drawn up any better. We've had so much help from my in-laws coming and supporting us. My brother showed up down in North Carolina. Small businesses around Chittenden County offering meals to help us out. Friends and community members are offering to drive my 8-year-old son to hockey practice and hockey games just to lighten the load. It's another example of how tight this community is.
Well, look, I love your story. Anybody that spends any time going through it, but I mean, this is real. You guys have put together more tournament wins than any other team in the country in the last 30 years. You've recruited at a higher level, and for one night, it all came together. And just on behalf of a bunch of buddies on a text thread and all of us that went to school there, that at times it probably felt left out during some of the national title chances. This was awesome. It was a moment a lot of us never thought we'd experience. So thanks.
Well, thanks for having me on, and for continuing to wear in green and gold with pride. Love the Catamount country.
All right, man. We'll catch up this summer.
Sounds good.
You want details? Fine. I drive a Ferrari 355 Cabriolet. What's up? I have a ridiculous house. in the South Fork. I have every toy you can possibly imagine. And best of all, kids, I am liquid. So, now you know what's possible. Let me tell you what's required.
I know we just finished up with UVM head coach, the national champs. Soccer. Yeah. Was a soccer guy there for a couple nights, watched the Denver game, and then came back for Marshall. They were down 1-0. I was actually like bummed out. And then when they scored the tying, I was like, this is what it feels like. This is amazing. I forgot what it feels like to care. And they won it, and it was cool. And it's just cool. You got to understand, like, you can make fun of it all you want. Maybe you should, but like for a group of guys that went to school together to all keep in touch, we're just not used to ever being in the mix for any of this kind of stuff. Even though UVM soccer's, had a nice little 3-year run here, but then to actually be national champs for the University of Vermont, to be national champs in a team sport like this, it's just cool. And then we just started thinking about like all the athletes, which half of them were my roommates. Obviously they had uniforms. I mean, I was an athlete too, but you get it. But I was just kind of like thinking about all the names, just the OG Berto, some of the other hockey players that we're buddies with, whether it was St. Louis, Perrin, Thomas, Ruide, Sorgi, Millsy, Jonesy, Smitty. Patrick Sharp, who I don't think we ever talked to each other while we were there, which is unfortunate because I think we would have been good friends. But I was just bartending, not technically enrolled in classes, I think, at that time. The Czech guys, Pavel, check me out t-shirt, gave me that shirt. Someone stole it from me. All the Lax guys, whether you go from, Bevel, who can forget the playmaker, Whitaker, Gordo, McGurk when Thompson called the timeout on his game-winning goal, which sucked. There's just a lot of different athletes. Big Jenny, 23 Cho. That girl from the track team, none of us can remember her name. So, yeah, this week meant a lot. Meant a lot to all of us. So, again, for a UVM community that doesn't get to have many national championship opportunities, just wanted to recognize some names. Okay, let's do life advice.
Are those real names? Like, I feel like
they definitely are. I can tell you, as a guy who went to a Northeast college like Potsdam and was, parallel,
me too.
Cross paths with like lacrosse teams, and it was all something like a shortened version of a name, and there's an E at the end. Yeah, Snorgy, or like that wasn't that guy's name. That's just, it was like that made too much sense not to call him that. So those are, I can guarantee those were all real names.
No, but it feels like every hockey team there's a Jonesy, there's the Schmitty, there's
Millsy.
It's
Miller,
Millsy,
Miller, but it's Millsy for some reason.
Well, it's just E, but then their hockey coaches are like out of their minds if somebody's last name ends in it organically.
Like Ceruti.
Then they don't. Yeah, Ceruti. Like, well, you would be
Rootsy.
Rootsy.
Please,
Rootsy.
no. God,
Without a
damn
doubt,
it. We're
you're
back
Rootsy.
to that.
Yeah, Greenberg. Yeah, Mike Greenberg was on it when he started. He was actually just giving
Was
you
he?
a hockey name.
Yeah. I will say, I guess we're all small Northeast, small to some degree Northeast school guys, and like when Quinnipiac won the hockey championship 2 years ago, it's just an indescribable feeling, because it's like, wait, people were talking about our school that you really was only known for like polling institutes. It's just, it's very strange, and you're like kind of on the map. And it's just I was kind of surprised. Like at UVM, I was a little surprised they hadn't won a hockey one, but to win the soccer one is pretty incredible.
By the way, they have like a handful of ski championships, but I don't know why those aren't counted. But
I mean, they are. What do you mean they're not counted? Like,
well, because the broadcast was like, it's the first time UVM's ever won this, and I didn't want to bring it up to Rob. Like, do you think you guys are overrated historically? How nice is that guy? I'd never talked to him before. I just love listening to the Halifax just leak out.
Yeah.
I should have asked him if, I don't know, was he friends with Sidney Crosby? Would they be about the same age? Because he's younger than I am.
Having a kid
anyway.
like a couple weeks ago and then going on this run too, I mean, it's also insane. Just would like to point that out. That's wild.
Stanford Steve would be fine.
I mean, what? It's a different story. He's literally built different. So
he's built different. Doesn't matter. Perfect segue, because we got a few responses. Well, let's do a couple follow-ups and then we'll save some lives. All right. This is the Kyle. Unreal call. Cheese waffies. Top-notch snack.
Oh, good.
$40 is low for what I would pay for a bag.
I knew somebody was going to get it out there. They were fucking unreal.
And he played hoops at SLU.
Oh, shit.
Love this. I love the St. Lawrence shout-outs. Just do a live show from St. Lawrence. I'm too old now.
I will
don't
say
think
too,
those guys
Kyle.
are built. I don't know if they're built the same.
Falika
Go
had
ahead.
your back, Kyle, because he texted Ryan and I. He spent $75 on croutons that I guess the place went out of business. So he just went on eBay and
Wow.
bought croutons for $75.
Salads just aren't the
So-
same without them, right? Yeah.
Incredible
Wait,
stuff.
did he text that to me?
Me and you. Yeah, you didn't respond. I responded.
Oh, man, Ryan, this is not good.
I didn't even see that.
He was too wrapped up in the Vermont national title run.
Yeah, you have an excuse, I guess.
Was it that night? I don't even.
It was.
I
I think it was that day. It was
That's
Monday.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's bad. If I there's plenty
Oh,
of people
man.
that I'm not going to respond to right away. Sometimes I don't respond, and it's actually the greatest compliment because I don't have a thorough answer for you. But you know what happens then? Then it just means But there are times where I get a text and I read it and go, "I'm not ready to answer this right now."
Yeah, I know.
So
That's
Oh.
totally
Mark it on red.
human. Yeah,
Get a market on red.
you have to. And then it'll stay that way for
I got a
17
bunch
days
right now.
sometimes.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
get anything done without that. Yeah.
I used to always have them cleaned out. Like when I would see other people like post some screenshot, I'd be like 289 texts. Like what is wrong with you?
That's
Now I get it.
Well, you're in 4 group chats, and it's like you'd be surprised what it looks like, and you got to mute them
Right.
because you're doing stuff. So then you look back and you're like, all right, this fantasy football league just had 50 texts out of nowhere. It's been 7 minutes. It's like it can build up.
I love not being on any fantasy threads.
Yeah.
That's
I don't
awesome.
know, I'm not loving group chats these days, but you got to do it. It's about relationships.
Well, there you go. Perfect segue into some more feedback. Valentine's Day live podcast follow-up comment. Been with my wife for 20 years, married 15 of it. Don't be a fucking baby. Relationships are about being flexible and being okay with some of the bullshit requests that each of you are going to throw out there. Give a little, get a little. Don't yuck her yum. You know how many stupid things I've been to and had to do? Innumerable. But I love my wife, and that's the whole goddamn point. I would do a million shitty bullshit things for her as she would for me. Peace and love. A million? Hey, man. We had a lot of those.
Real Johnny Sack over here.
I
Just
just
my
think-
life.
I don't want to bring it up, but it did seem like most people were on my side on that one. Because listen, there's many.
You didn't
plenty of
want to bring
times,
it
like,
up?
Do you think
Well, credit to
my
you.
wife Maddie is like super pumped to watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy once every 18 months or so? No, but it's a trade-off situation.
I bet she likes a little more each
She
time.
does
though.
actually. You're right.
Yeah.
It's kind of grown on her.
Especially if you start with the theatrical and then you're like, look at this. This is the extended cut. She's like, holy
Yep.
fuck, I didn't even know
Yep.
all this lore. Yeah.
I whip out the bookcase DVD sets, and I'm like, let's go. Whoo! Our weekend is booked.
Turn the air on. Jesus.
A lot of people gave up on Die Hard after the second one. But let me tell you something. Okay. No, I get it. Does that mean you have to do everything you don't want to do for the rest of your life?
There are some
No.
dudes that will do that, and that's 100%. And they'll do it like
Do you
wear
think
it like
so?
a badge of honor.
There's
There's
gonna
some
be
dudes that wear it like a badge of honor, I think. But I'm not that dude.
I just think an all-female podcast. I feel bad for women that show up to my podcast. I apologize to them, the 4 that make it.
We think we identified one at the last show that was like jazzed. And then, there was a couple that were clearly doing their boyfriends a favor.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's also something on the other side of it. It's like, hey, if my significant other is going to hate this, how
Maybe
about I don't
make
ask them?
go.
Yeah.
Right.
How about I don't make you do anything? How about that? But yeah, we had
but
a lot
again,
of those.
It's like is this a one-off thing, or is this are you just miserable? Because you're being asked to do all the shit you don't want to do. If it's like a one-off, just freaking do it, man. It's Valentine. Again, we don't
I
need
just
to
thought the
rehash
weird
this,
part
but-
was that it was long distance, right? This way, if I can recall back to something 2 days ago, hopefully I can. I thought he said it was a long distance relationship, and it was like sort of like
yeah, they were going to be in the
town.
same city. For
Yeah,
4,
and he was
right.
yeah, and he was just like, maybe we could do something where we're not facing the same direction and shutting up for 2. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's part of it. I could understand, be like, hey, I'm coming into town. I booked a flight or whatever. He drove, however it worked. And he was like, I was looking forward to taking you out, blah, blah, blah. She's like, actually, you know what? That's really nice and thoughtful. But I think what I would like more is if we could go to this thing that you would hate. So I guess I understand it. But you're right. Valentine's Day is rarely for the dudes.
And pick something you want to do then. I don't know. Like, go to an NBA game. I don't know. Like I don't. This isn't that hard.
It's not.
You need stuff to do. What are you going to sit and you're just going to go out to eat all the time? All 4 days, you're just going to go out to restaurants and like sit in hotel. What do you need stuff to do? This is something to do.
I think a great couple is ones that understand he's going to hate this, so I don't ask him to go. And conversely, if I'm like, I got to tell you, Medieval Manor, I know what it says on Yelp, but the food is way better than you would think. Just go by yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate that my wife doesn't ask me to go to see these breathy singers that are playing in a park somewhere, that I just don't like. They're like the cemetery, like Hollywood Forever Cemetery. And it's like, we got to get there early because it's a free concert. And I did one of those and I was like, you mind not asking me to do that again? And I'll find someone to go to John Mayer with. And she's like, deal. I'm like,
she didn't want to go to John
how easy
Mayer?
it was. No, she went, but it was just like, I'm not going to drag you to
Speaking
this.
of breathy.
I know the irony, but it's world renowned, so it's a little different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's read a couple emails. Wife's Christmas party. Hey guys, huge fan of the pod. 5'11", 240, only lift with dumbbells. Recently started doing yoga for a bulky hip. It helped. Player comp, 90s era Knicks point guard Derek Harper can move the ball around, play a passable point with a few moves to surprise you. My wife, let's call her Amanda, 33, was recently told by her boss of 5 years. I guess we're calling her. She changed the name. If you change the first one, let's assume you changed the second one.
Yeah.
Right. Or Dana's on blast here. Her boss of 5 years, Dana, 39, that she was closing her small interior design business as of the new year and would not be needed. Upon discussing with others and reading the room, Amanda realized her boss is continuing the business and basically firing her to continue with the other 2 employees who've been around for much less time. Ooh. Her boss did not have the guts to tell her the truth after 5 years. They've been close friends, which makes this difficult. And the company for 4 of the last 5 years was just the 2 of them prior to the new hirings. She also helped with watching Dana's 4 kids when needed. Since she is a 1099 employee, she lacks any benefits from her job, including unemployment. My problem is this. My wife wanted to go to the Christmas party, the company Christmas party. Despite being let go, she also wants to invite her to our upcoming first birthday for our daughter. Am I wrong for not wanting anything to do with this lady anymore? My wife is unemployed now, and we had to stop at our daughter's daycare since it was close to my wife's daily commute by her office. I understand they created a bond over these years, but I feel like my wife just doesn't have the confidence or self-worth to stand up for herself, and that Dana has treated her incredibly poorly based on their history. My wife does not have many friends and did create a close bond with her boss, which has me conflicted. Any advice would be appreciated. Well, sounds like you just have to do whatever she wants to do, man.
Here we go.
I think you go to this Christmas party and you fucking say what you got to say. What do you got to lose? At this point, there's nothing to lose, right?
The Detroit Lions? All right, Ceruti. You didn't seem to like that joke very much. Why don't you start?
No, it's whatever. It's fine. I kind of like Kyle's idea. Like, this is, you're clearly you've had this conversation with your wife, I would assume, about like you not agreeing that she should be cool with this person. I'm on your side, but if she doesn't have a ton of friends and she doesn't want to lose that social circle, like that's maybe a bigger deal in this situation. But I think you just go to this party and just be kind of an asshole. Or at least you just, if she tries,
give me some examples. What are you guys doing?
If she tries to talk
what are you guys doing?
I think there's a moment when you're like, you think we're fucking idiots? Like there might be like, I'm on to you. Maybe you're nicer about it, but you're like,
have you ever said I'm on to you to someone in your life? Does anyone say that?
That would be a great fucking time to do it, though. You know what I mean? That's one of those golden opportunities.
Or you just say like, oh, cool, actually, you had the money to throw this party, and yet can't even be honest with my wife.
Wait,
I think you
where's
make
the
her feel-
correlation there? You had the money to throw this party, but you
well,
couldn't.
she basically laid your wife off and is still doing stuff and still continuing the business and is throwing a holiday party. Like, why did you need to lay my wife off? Your friend. Why did you need to do this? Doesn't seem like it's a money issue, and you can't even be honest with her. So I don't know. That's what I would do.
I'd spend my next 5-6 showers leading up to this party just thinking about how I'm going to do this. Cool fucking one-liners. Doesn't seem like I'm trying too hard. Like I'm like, instead of my little type 5 that I sometimes practice in there, I was singing a Meatloaf song today. I would use that time to think about what the fuck I'm going to do and how I'm going to pull this off where it's going to be like movie scene-esque or like really nice, like Taylor Sheridan dialogue, like where I come in there and I can say, and I know all the stuff she said to me all those years when she's talking about work and stuff like that. And now she's at this party. There is no repercussions. She's already fired. There's no like losing of benefits or anything like that. She's already been boned. She doesn't see it. I can use this is my superpower. And I'm going to find the exact right words where I'm going to be like, wow, that was like, you're basically like a fucking actor. How great you pulled that off. That's what I would spend the next couple weeks doing.
Used to celebrate birthdays with stone. And now we do it with cake. A symbol of how soft society is getting.
Is that Yellowstone? What is that?
I don't know. I was trying. I wouldn't go to the party. I would tell your wife, or look, you want to go to the Christmas party? Fine. You got to pick one. You can't then invite her over to the first birthday one. All right. So it's Christmas party or this. If that starts a fight, whatever. I think long term here, you need to get your wife motivated to start her own design company. There's very low overhead on this. You get out there, you've got the contacts, you start undercutting this fucking woman, Dana. You start loading up the clients. Your wife's going to have business. She's going to have her confidence back. Revenge 101.
All right. That was probably the best advice.
Yeah.
I'd still be doing scenes in the shower thinking about this, though. I would go to that party.
You guys would go. I would not go.
I just went to the Goop holiday party. Fucking awesome time. And there was a Ryen Russillo guy there. So that was cool, too.
Oh, nice.
What does that mean?
Guy that worked there was like, does anyone ever tell you look like Kyle? And I was like, yeah. And then we spent like 40 minutes talking about Ryen Russillo podcasts and stuff like that. So
40. It's a long time.
Long
yeah,
time.
but did anyone at Goop betray your wife? You just went to a party, dude.
Couple of rounds,
same thing.
Couple of rounds of layoffs, so those people are kind of gone. No, I know. I'm just saying. I think it's cool to go to a holiday party. Although, I don't know. I mean, when's the last time the Ringer had a holiday party? Probably 2019. Like those were fucking awesome. Missed those. Probably never going to get them back. I enjoy the setting of a holiday party. I think I might even enjoy the setting of a holiday party a little more when it's your significant other's holiday party. You're like fucking free reign. I'm really not.
But these are not. What? Yeah, but you're missing the element of betrayal. You're just talking about going to parties, dude.
What do you mean?
Like,
no,
wait,
I'm saying,
booze?
and then you pick the time to do this thing that you pick. They were actually pretty good there. But then you pick the time to do this thing that you're excited to finally say to this boss. Also, I'm a little confused. Is it a holiday party where there's 3 employees in this company?
That's what.
Is this like a Is this like a Michael Scott holiday party, like in the break room?
I don't know. It sounds like there's low numbers. It sounds like there's really low numbers. But
if you are 25% of the party or 20% of the party, I would not confront this person. If you yourself make up a good percentage of the people in the room, I wouldn't do it. But if there's a lot of people in the room, then I would do it.
Or do you play up to like, because she told your wife that she's closing down the design shop, right? So do you be like, hey, just keep talking about how it's such a shame it's going away and how much your wife loved this, and like, man, it was like, it's so great that she could have you as the employee, and just really guilt trip her the entire time into believing.
I like that as well.
Yeah, I feel I'm with you, Kyle. Like, I would want to go because I would want to like, kind of twist the knife a little bit, and make her
only
feel
because she wants to go. If my wife didn't want to go, I wouldn't give a shit. But because she wants to go, like, that's why I'm suggesting this, not like talking her out of wanting to go and success is the best revenge. It's like, listen, this is how she wants to do it. And I just got a little something I want to say too. And we'll all go home happy.
Right. But I think the part that stuck out to me the most was he's talking about his wife's confidence. And so since her confidence has been probably low prior to this, okay, and dinged even more, that there's a bit of this Stockholm syndrome of, well, I still want this person in my life after she didn't just fire you, she lied to you and then kept it going with the other two people, which again could explore a whole other element of this conversation of like, is your wife bad at this job? Is, whatever. But I
Does
think
she make too much? And
right.
he was like,
Very
this
well.
is a great move. I can just keep the young people and,
Also a very good
They
point
don't even
to
know
bring
better.
up. Right. But I would think, because I've seen this happen firsthand with girls that I know that work in design. Like once you kind of put together that book of business, you start getting things rolling. Like the long-term play, fine, go to the party, whatever. I wouldn't go. I would tell her why you should not want to go. And you should also, worse than go to her party, not want to invite her to our baby's first birthday when somebody can do this to you. Okay. There needs to be a price paid for doing this to you in the way that she did it. And part of that admission is no invite to the fucking kid's birthday. But long term, it sounds like you would be better off if you want to just say yes to these things because she wants to do it, trying to find a way to get your wife to start feeling better about herself and have more confidence. And I think a more confident person in this scenario would likely go, I want nothing to do with you.
Right.
I will have nothing to do with you. All right. Did I instigate a bar fight? Uh-oh.
I'm listening.
This Monday, I met my mom at Buffalo Wild Wings to watch Ryan's Bears. We could just stop reading. Is that a perfect sentence?
It's the best. It's the best.
There's so many smart people
I
and
know.
good writers. Like, I hope some of you that are really good writers and great at crafting some of these emails, I hope you
use that.
No, but I just hope you give yourself the credit for it. Because like when I get a really well-constructed email where there's like a theme and then it builds and then there's a twist, you're just like, man, there's a lot of people out there that are just really good at this stuff. All right. We moved to Texas from the Chicago burbs during COVID to be close to my wife's family. My mom moved there shortly after. So any chance we can get to see a Bears game together, we try to do it. We're sitting at the bar counter and this gregarious guy walks up next to us, asking if the spot next to us is free and then getting our names. He introduces himself as Edward and says, I know, it's an old name. K guy.
Jesus.
No, this is the emailer. Yeah. K guy. That was like a Kyle thing.
That's his internal monologue. Yeah.
Yeah. He orders a double Woodford neat. Woodford 2. Ben Mendelsohn. A tall draft beer. So a double Woodford neat, tall draft beer, and some nachos. So far, so good. We come to find out he's a Lions fan, and he notices me wearing a Bears shirt. And I say, you guys are really good right now. You must be stoked. And he responds with, quote, yeah, and I'm glad my quarterback doesn't paint his nails.
All right.
Texas.
The number of people, by the way, that are doing a victory lap in the Caleb Williams sucks. It is, I think, about the nails more than anything else. All right. Okay, I say, well, it's 2025. Is this email from the future? Who really cares about nail polish? He says, quote, last I checked, men were supposed to play quarterback. He should change the number of his jersey to XX and proceeds to explain XX versus
Chromosomes.
XY chromosomes to us.
Damn, he couldn't just let the joke live. He had to be like, you see, why this is funny is
He gets like, now I'm going to science you guys. So now he's changed the tenor of his interaction. My mom curls slightly toward me as if to cut him out of the conversation. And I can see he has clocked it. A few minutes later, he stands up from the bar, turns towards the exterior door, and just stands there for a while, noticeably swaying. He's had the double and the beer, but it's just occurring to me that he probably arrived 3 sheets and has added several layers to his drunken stupor. He's also displaying some tics. Oh, Jesus. And vacillating between a smile and a scowl. He sits back down, waiting for his nacho, and my mom gets up to use the restroom. So it's just he and I now. And for some reason, I try to make small talk. You tried again, dude?
What are you doing?
And instead of just grabbing our beers and moving to a table, the following is verbatim. Me. So what do you think of your coordinator? He's been linked to the Bears. Talking about Ben Johnson. Edward, I'm sorry. I don't want to be rude. I'm sorry. Me. No, that's fine. Have a good night. Edward, where's he coached before? Me. I don't know. I'm not familiar with his history. Edward, exactly. Look, I'm sorry. I've played at all levels of football. All levels. I think based on his previously stated views on manhood and knowledge of chromosomes, He's intimating that any person who wasn't previously a player couldn't possibly be a head coach. Me, okay, enjoy your nachos. He stands up again, turns towards the door, this time walks out. It's a side door, so it's reasonable to assume, for a while at least, that he's having a smoke or something, and his nachos have just arrived, but he never returns, sticking the overworked bartender, who also has 4 tables, with his tab. She brings over the manager and said he was talking to these two, indicating my mom and me as if to try to pinpoint a motive for dashing. I firmly believe the problem is this guy and that I said nothing wrong, but I do feel badly for the bartender, so I add what would be a normal tip for Edward and ordered what would be a normal tip for what Edward ordered to my tip when I tab out. Also, my mom insists that she drive me to my car, fearing this guy will jump me. So, 1, did I do anything to instigate this reaction? And 2, if you're going to dine and dash, why not at least have the nachos first? The fact that this is an awesome email, but I'm guessing it's because you're from Chicago that you're feeling some sort of friendliness guilt here. This guy was obviously tanked before he showed up, dusted it off, and then it hit him pretty hard. And so either the whole plan was, I'm going to order the nachos to bait them into the double neat Woodford and free beer, or when he went outside a second time and he's not smoking, do you know how drunk you have to be to like go get fresh air and then come back into Buffalo Wild Wings and do it twice? That probably the second fresh air intermission, it probably just hit him where he was like, I'm so drunk, I have to be out of here. But he didn't even remember the nachos, didn't care.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
look,
an Irish exit if I've ever seen one.
Yeah, right. I mean,
a voice
Kyle,
in his head was just like, leave now. And he's like, yes, okay, all right. And he just fucking
the
walked.
autopilot went
Hopefully he
off.
Didn't get in his car and drive, but he
Right.
just
He did. He 100% did.
Yeah.
The loudest voice was screaming, leave, and he was like, yes, and that's what happened. That's what happened.
So
Don't feel bad.
What advice does he want? He could have done something differently.
He was like, did I do something to stress out this
You did
Buffalo
nothing.
Wild Wings staff? Did I hurt this guy's feelings enough that he left? No.
Edward did a ton of things before you were even in the equation.
Right.
Okay. So
Guys that order a double shot and a beer, it's probably not their first drink of the day, unless that's actually not true. But I think that guy was
unless they need to catch up, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Overriding theme, emailer did nothing wrong. I think the only weird part is you think you potentially could have done something wrong, or maybe it was the guilt of when a Buffalo Wild Wings bartender points at you, being like,
right. That's when he
those
really
are
started
his
thinking.
friends.
Yeah, this is your guy.
I don't know. What'd you say to him, man? What did you say to him?
What did you say? Well, he doesn't like Caleb Williams. You brought up Caleb Williams to that guy? What are you, nuts? You didn't know Ben Johnson's background? You're gonna finish your drinks and you're gonna leave.
I really thought Buffalo Wild Wings was big enough in one of those places that, they take your card, swipe it, and give it back to you, even if they don't need to hold it down. I thought it was one of those places that's just like, it's our policy. If you want to tab, let me just swipe it. I'll give it right back to you. Edward's all cash.
Or no cash.
No cash, right?
Okay. That'll do it for us. Thanks to Oregon. Thanks to Kyle. Thanks to Ceruti. Check out our YouTube page that did not have bonus content this week. Not shocked. That's on me. But check it out anyway. And please subscribe. Ryen Russillo Podcast, Ringer, Spotify. We'll see you on Friday. 2 episodes Christmas week as well.